everybody, it's Dr. Dickenson, and today I'm going to be talking about self-assessment and student self-assessment. We're going to be talking about what it is, what it's not, and how you can integrate student self-assessment in your instruction. And if you're working on CAL TPA Cycle 2, this video is for you because I've been getting comments from people asking me to talk a little bit about student self-assessment, which is included in the rubric. And what exactly is it and what should I include? So before we get started, if you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you are already using self-assessment, please share with us, add a comment, tell us how you're using self-assessment. What does it look like in your classroom with your learners, in your content area, and across subjects? So let's get started. You may be asking yourself, hey, self-assessment, I've never done this. How do I design this? Do I really need to include this in all the other kinds of assessment? And the short answer is yes. As new teachers, you may be thinking, that's a whole lot of assessment data. Do I really need to include this? Yeah, it is. And because we want to really look at the whole child, we want to be working with our students. Self-assessment is going to give us the tools to provide them with feedback and evidence for where they need to grow. So when we just have one piece of data, like an exit ticket, it's not giving us enough information about our students and their learning. While some students might be able to do something like dribble a basketball after 1 minute lesson, other students need more practice, more coaching, and more feedback. So we can look holistically at our students and make decisions when we have multiple forms of data to really shape our beliefs about the learners, as well as to give them feedback about what are the skills that we want them to do. So, you might be thinking, all right, so I see in my observation of, say, I had a student, Kyle, and he's able to serve a volleyball. That's the standard we're working on, right? But then I gave him the self-assessment, and he said that sometimes he's able to serve a volleyball and be able to do that where he's hitting that desired direction. So even though in my observation as the PE teacher, I could see that Kyle has some of these skills, this is still something that he needs to work on. And so I'm going to work on how he can work on serving a ball in a specific direction with much more frequency. Okay. So that brings me to a big no-no in self-assessment. Self-assessment is not something that where students are just rating themselves. You don't want to ask your students like, hey, how confident do you feel adding fractions with unlike denominators? They might say, yeah, not at all. It's not giving you any evidence about what they can do. Or when would you ever use the quadratic formula? And they say IDK. You will get IDK in a lot. Yeah. And you're like, whoa, this is not telling me anything, right? So we really want to get to the more granular level when we're designing a self-assessment. And that can always begins with unpacking our standards and identifying the specific skills that are within that standard so that we can include that in our instruction, but as well as in our self-assessment. And when we do that, our students can then get insight about what they need to work on. So for example, let's say that we're working on a standard where kids are adding fractions with unlike denominators, and we've gone through our unit. Kids have been practicing. I've given some exit tickets. They've done a couple of activities. And now here's the self-assessment. My self-assessment is going to include skills like, can you find the least common multiple of the two fractions? Can you create a model to represent each fraction? And can you use the LCM as the common denominator? So 3 skills there. There could be more, absolutely. And when I give them the self-assessment, I just don't want them to just sit there and reflect. I want to give them evidence. So that's all the pieces of evidence, the assessments, those formal and informal assessments that I've been doing throughout the assessment, so that they can look at that evidence and say, yeah, I can do that. And here's where I am in that progression. I can do that always. I've got this. I'm advanced because I'm able to do this always. or maybe I'm doing this sometimes, so I haven't really achieved mastery yet. And so notice that when we start giving them and they start building that in, what happens is students are starting to really take on a growth mindset. And by that, they can see where they need to improve, because a growth mindset is where students are reflecting, they're thinking about where they can improve, they're looking at their own data, and they're setting goals. Okay. And of course, this can be used in other content areas. You might have your students perhaps writing a friendly letter, and I'm using I'm using something like a self-assessment, giving them back their evidence, which includes my annotations on their letter, as well as maybe a peer assessment. And that a self-assessment form might have categories such as usually, often, sometimes, or never. Now, when students are doing the self-assessment, that criteria, that rationale is going to, again, give them next steps about where they can improve. Perhaps they forgot to indent each paragraph, and now they're seeing that, oh, is that's part of the requirements for being able to write a friendly letter with proficiency, so on and so forth. So this evidence is going to support our students in their progression. It's going to allow them to see where they need to go, where they need to grow. All right, so that the more that we can provide them with this data, the better they can reflect, the more they can make progress, because they know what they have to do and how they need to do it. And of course, we can provide them with individualized instruction, differentiation. We can allow them to work in mixed ability grouping, and they can continue to work on the skills that they need to work on. So very similar to our IEPs, right? When our students are working on the individualized educational plan, that self-assessment piece is critical towards students progressing and setting goals. So that's the whole big idea. And there's been a lot of educational research on the power of self-assessment. Certainly, it's been a tie to academic achievement. It's based on DC's work of self-determination theory. And the more the students know where they need to grow, the more determined they are to reach those goals. So in essence, when we are giving self-assessment, we're teaching towards mastery. We can't be teaching towards mastery if students don't know what mastery looks like. So use those self-assessments to really highlight what mastery is in your content area, and that specific unit that you're designing instruction for. So again, to highlight your CAL TPA Cycle 2, you want to include informal assessments and rubrics. And your informal assessments can be questioning, they can be observations. And then you want to include your formal assessments, which can be quizzes, projects, papers, and performances. And those are, everything is based on those content standards as well as those rubrics. You want to always include a rubric and with your self-assessment as well. So big ideas: student self-assessment, help your students determine what they can and cannot do. And again, it's going to help us as teachers promote those soft skills like student autonomy, metacognition, responsible decision making, all of those SEL practices that we've been learning about. And it will help us drive our instruction, but more importantly, it will support our learners in knowing what they can and can't do and where they need to improve. So we always want to think about our assessment is going beyond our role of the teacher just collecting, right? I'm the assessment collector, collecting evidence. And that's a lot of work, by the way. But we also want to make sure that our assessments give our students feedback and feedback for themselves, and self-assessments do that. So hopefully you found this video helpful. I know there's so much to think about when you're designing instruction, but don't worry. The more you do these practices, the more they just come to you with automaticity. And don't worry if you don't show it all in your CAL TPA. The big idea is that you catch yourself not showing it all, and then you reflect on what you would do differently. These are called high leverage practices because they are research based. We know they work with our students and they help them grow and help them adopt those soft skills that really lead to lifelong learning. Hopefully you found this video helpful. Please let me know in the comments what you'd love to see more of, what you found helpful. I also have a ton of examples that I'd love to share with you all and for all certain content areas. So hopefully you found that helpful, and I'd love to hear from you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.